Welcome to Live with the Author. I'm Amanda Goodwin, and I'm an associate professor at Vanderbilt University. I'm also the co-editor of Reading Research Quarterly, and today we're going to be talking about one of our fantastic manuscripts in the special issue of the Science of Reading. If you want to find out more about this article, you can find it in our special issue, or you can email any of these fantastic authors. Welcome, authors.
Hi, I'm Melissa Wetzel from the University of Texas at Austin, and our article is titled Resisting Positionings of Struggle in Science of Teaching Reading Discourse, Counterstories of Teachers and Teacher Educators in Texas.
I've got to say, as soon as I read the counter stories, I was so excited to read on to hear about those counter stories. And you have here with you the rest of your authors. Can you guys introduce yourselves really quickly?
Hi, I'm Allie Duffy. I am currently a first grade teacher. I've also been an interventionist, reading recovery teacher, and second grade teacher. And I also lead a cohort where I spend a year with teachers developing and growing their reading skills.
I'm Beth Maloch, and I am a former fourth grade teacher from years ago. I am on faculty at UT Austin in Language and Literacy Studies. And over the last 8 years, I've been an associate, which is part of the way I come into this work around science of reading.
Hi, I'm Jessie Murdter-Atkinson. I'm a third-year doctoral student at UT Austin in the Language and Literacy Studies program. And before that, I was a former classroom teacher for 15 years, as well as an instructional coach. And yes.
Hi, I'm Myra Infante-Sheridan. I'm an assistant professor of practice for curriculum and instruction. I teach literacy courses and serve as coordinator for a literacy cohort of pre-service teachers in our program. I'm a former secondary English teacher that transitioned to EC6 as part of my doctoral program. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tracey Flores. I'm an assistant professor in language and literacy. I teach courses in our undergraduate pre-service teacher program. I teach language arts methods as well as a community literacy course. And I also am a former classroom teacher. I taught for 8 years in Phoenix, Arizona, second grade all the way to sixth grade, English language development and English language arts. And I also direct a program called Somos Escritoras, which is a space for Latina girls to write and share their stories.
Hi, my name is Vickie Charlene. I'm a doctoral candidate at UT, and I'm an assistant instructor, and I teach the literacy methods to the undergraduates in our program. I'm a former elementary school teacher, 5th and kindergarten, and I taught all grades, or I mean all subject areas. So that's it.
And it looks like we have one additional author who was not able to be here today, Dr. Allison Skerrett. Fantastic. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. And I'm so excited. This is the first time I'm doing an interview with so many authors. But I think what's beautiful about this is as I've read a lot of these manuscripts about the science of reading, there has been calls for partnerships between practitioners, between researchers, between teacher preparation, focused individuals. And so you guys represent this wonderful partnership, and I can't wait to hear more. And I always kind of start by wondering a little bit about the science of reading. The science of reading can be seen in like really different terms. What is the science of reading to you guys?
Well, I'm going to start off. This is Melissa Wetzel. I wanted to start off by saying, just in reference to your note about collaboration, we actually started thinking about this article in the airport. And Jessie and I were sitting on chairs heading back to UT from Nashville, actually. And, so we said, you know what, we've got lots of stories to tell about how we've been responding to the science of teaching reading in our state, and we'd really like to tell those stories. And we started to think about who have been our partners in these stories, and that's how this group really came together. But in terms of the science of reading, we think about the science of reading as being this, this area of research that focuses on the important role that aspects of reading development play in children's learning to read. And also, as we see in the special issue, our knowledge is just expanding of all of these components of reading that have drawn researchers' attention for over the years. And so, so in the article, we talk about these 4 narratives around the science of reading that, that we see as being really prevalent in these discussions. One is around the foundational role that aspects of phonemic awareness, fluency, comprehension, phonics, and vocabulary play in learning to read.
Sounds like the NRP.
And then the sort of the plus that we're starting to see in the research. But then also a narrative around the science of teaching reading. Some of the findings of the studies about reading development have strong implications for instruction. And then there's also a growing body of research around how teachers take up the science of reading in their practice. And so oftentimes those narratives are sort of maybe unquestioned, or maybe it's or they're very highly questioned, but we present those as being narratives that are present, not necessarily true or false. But then there's these new narratives that we find connected to the science of reading around teacher preparation, and a narrative that perhaps teacher educators hold deficits when it comes to understanding the science of reading and the science of teaching reading, and that as a result, teachers are not being prepared strongly in these areas. And that as a result of teachers not being prepared, that perhaps we're letting students down in terms of the instruction they're receiving. And so we really take up those last 2 narratives strongly in this piece, and really think about what we turn the lens on ourselves and really thought about what we do in terms of preparing teachers to teach reading, and how what we've been doing and the work we've been doing at the University of Texas and with our partners has either been included or excluded from some of those narratives.
Well, that's so interesting. You know, as you guys know, I work in teacher preparation as well at Vanderbilt. So I read your piece eagerly, like really trying to understand, because it's such a complicated piece. You know, you mentioned partnerships. As you're preparing teachers, there's so many partnerships that you're working through. So what does your piece add to the science of reading understandings?
I'll just say briefly before my co-authors talk a little bit more about some of the different aspects that that when we take up this work, we're most deeply concerned with issues of equity and social justice in teaching. And so we're thinking about how teachers serve the communities, the families, and the children that are entrusted to us. And so if you're listening to this and you're a teacher, know that we're coming really at this from a place from our own histories of practice, and thinking about the many challenges that teachers face in this current moment with COVID-19, and also throughout history. We're really thinking about those challenges that teachers face, especially when it comes to thinking about how to apply what we know about practice to our work in what have been marginalized communities in terms of their linguistic and cultural knowledge and what they bring. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessie and Allie to really talk about that from the teaching perspective.
Okay, well, I'm glad, Melissa, that you began by saying this really came from a place of our own teaching experience and how we're all classroom teachers at heart, because I know we often have conversations about that, and we were really centering teachers in this commentary that we wrote together. And so in our Counterstories, we really wanted to position teachers both pre-service and in service as the transformative intellectuals that we believe them to be. And additionally, we wanted to highlight the different possibilities for ways in which teachers can balance authentic literacy instruction with increasing standardization while remaining culturally and linguistically responsive to our students. So Allie's going to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and so as we wrapped around these communities and had discussions, we really wanted to continue to lift the teachers and their pedagogical knowledge, as well as their sense of self-efficacy. Because just because you work in a school district, children and students vary, not only within a campus, but across a campus. And we really wanted teachers to have that efficacy, to know what to do to respond to their kids. And so we hope by sharing some of our experiences that teachers are going to walk away with some actionable steps and might even continue to take up some of this work in their classrooms or in the classrooms of people they're working with.
Sounds really exciting. So, that leads me to wonder, what are those steps that they should take? What should a teacher do tomorrow based off of your article?
So I think the first thing is being reflective about the students in the classroom and the work that you're coming to with. I think coming from a reading recovery lens, we always build off strengths. And whatever our students come to us with is where we start. So we want to build off the linguistic component. We want to build off the family component. We want to build off the cultural component. We want to build off all the building blocks of reading. And it needs to be a holistic approach, not just you come and I'm going to teach you phonics because that's what the district curriculum says I'm supposed to do.
And there, it sounds like you're saying sort of step one is get to know your student from all sides, from the family side, from the skills side, from who they are. I was speaking yesterday with Dr. Rich Milner, who has another piece here, and he was talking about culturally responsive classrooms and the ones he's been in. He said the first key was to sort of build that relationship with students. Does that fit with what you're suggesting here?
Absolutely. And I think no two kids and no two groups of kids year to year are ever going to be the same. And that's why as teachers, we need to see teachers as these people who can add to their toolbox, because giving someone a canned curriculum, that's not going to work for every single child in your classroom. And so you have to know your kids and how they change from week to week and across the year.
So do you have examples of how you've done that? Or, it seems like a really hard thing. I've got, 25 kids in my class, and how do I help these 25 different individuals? We have various different papers. We've got a paper about teacher adaptive expertise. We also have lots of papers that acknowledge that this is so complex. And so in terms of teacher training, there's a bunch of things we need to try, to do to help get across these complexities. One of the things I really enjoyed about your paper were these success stories. So what are some of the ways that you've tried doing this and had success in it?
So you mentioned teacher professional development, and 2 of the counterstories spoke to professional development communities or communities of practice where teachers got together and they were able to study these things in depth and then try them out in their classrooms and then come back and share their experiences with it and get feedback. And so that might be one way that teachers could move forward in their work, is to try and find, it could just be one teacher to form a community where they'll study something together. They might study a text together, they might study a practice together, they might try things out, give each other feedback, and share out about their experiences.
It's so important. I'm kind of hearing 2 things that teachers can do tomorrow. The first is kind of step outside the box of your curriculum, or get comfortable stepping outside of your box of your curriculum based off of what your students need. So get to know your students so that you know what they need, and be excited to adapt accordingly. And then also build those communities that you can explore this further with. What about principals and policymakers? What do they have to learn from your article?
So I think that is a question that we've been thinking about in terms of our partnerships. So one thing that we do in the College of Education is we meet regularly with district personnel. We also consult with principals and also teachers and teacher leaders in the schools where we work. And what we found is incredibly important. I'm going to ask Myra to speak to this a little bit, is that one of the best ways to build those relationships is to put our work right into a school. And so what we've done is we've embedded our literacy courses in a school-based context, and actually multiple people on this call can speak to how that works, but basically we're saying to our partners that we care and we want to partner with you enough that we're going to pick up all of our tubs of books, and we're going to bring our materials there, and we're going to be there to support the students, the families, the teachers, and the communities in ways that move beyond what teacher education programs typically kind of step in to do. Myra, do you want to talk about the work that you do at the elementary school?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so our course is based at an elementary school, and our pre-service teachers have the opportunity to mentor children who come to us in our classroom. And as we're doing this work, we invite our pre-service teachers to think critically as they're teaching their young students how to read as they plan and they deliver instruction, on phonemic awareness. And with that added component of working with multilingual learners. And circling back to what was said earlier in the conversation about getting to know students, we really lean into culturally sustaining pedagogy. And so this has been a really rich experience in seeing the pre-service teachers with their young students, because as they themselves are preparing to work with diverse texts, getting to know their students and understand the diversity even within one culture. And as they're doing this for their students, they themselves are also growing. I saw something really remarkable happen in that I had several students who came from a Latino heritage, and that maybe had Spanish as a heritage language and had not used it very much up until this point. But the motivation in working with multilingual learners and with bilingual learners, they started to revisit their heritage language, and I saw growth develop. Now by this semester, they are fully confident. They're doing really great. So it goes both ways. The students benefit, the young students benefit, and so do the pre-service teachers when we ask them to think critically and think how they're preparing to teach these multilingual learners. Thank you.
And do you find that the partnership with the principals and policymakers helps them to ask some of the same questions you're asking? So helps them to unpack the boxed curriculum in ways that have them starting with students or have them starting with their teachers as experts?
Yeah, I'll just say briefly, absolutely. I also invite and encourage pre-service teachers to influence the spaces that they're in. And sometimes administrators and policymakers don't know how the ideal, using culturally sustaining pedagogy, how does that work logistically? How does that look? How can we do this and
Sounds
still
pretty, but what does it look like?
Yes, exactly. And so by modeling it when they walk into the classroom, by seeing what's happening, by hearing the reactions of the cooperating teachers in that campus and the children that are participating in the program, all of these things they're marketing what we're using in a way, and that convinces them because they can see the results. They can see that we can cover the content, we can cover the standards, while also sustaining the children's cultures, while also teaching them, including the whole child, not just, a superficial curriculum, standardized kind of program.
Well, and it feels like, so these partnerships are powerful for principals and policymakers, but it almost feels like if you don't have these opportunities, if you're not near a university, you might also be able to do similar to the teachers and have a kind of learning partnership where you can work together with a principal policymaker who's doing this kind of partnership, or where you explore these ideas of unboxing curriculum or thinking about students at the center. So it seems like a really powerful thing. And I feel like we started this conversation with your partnership. We moved into teachers' partnerships with students in terms of really, adjusting their teaching based off of their expertise and knowledge of students. But now we have principals and policymakers moving into partnerships as well. What does this have to say for parents?
Everything. Our parents are our most important partners in this work. Part of our field-based experience at UT, I teach a course called Community Literacies, and it's a field-based course, and it's a course in which students work alongside an adult learner to support them in their literacy development. And so the adult learner sets goals alongside the pre-service teacher, and the teacher designs lessons based upon what they're already doing as a learner and where they can move them along based upon their goals. And it's really beautiful to watch the pre-service teacher work alongside the adult learner, and in that learn how to build relationships with parents, because these are parents from the school. Learn how to build relationships with parents, enter as a learner and a listener alongside our parents, and really put into practice what we're learning in class. So in class, we talk a lot about the community and familial literacies that are present in the homes and all of these rich resources that our students come with to the classroom. And so they firsthand get to learn alongside the parent as well. So they're designing lessons alongside the parent, but also the parent is teaching them so much about who they are and their hopes and their dreams for their students. And this carries on into, they carry this with them along their professional learning experiences into their classroom. And so they enter with this desire to know, like, parents matter, building relationships with parents matter, and parents come with great knowledge of their child's history and their learning that we as educators can really build upon. And so when I think about the science of reading and parents are everything. Parents have a knowledge that they can share with us. They have these hopes and their dreams for their children. And we need to be in open communication with them, because there's a lot in the science of reading that we can unpack together and build across spaces to really mobilize around the child to be successful. And so parents are everything.
You know, as I hear you talk, I almost feel like they're a neglected part of the science of reading. Like, I almost feel like we need to do more studying of how to capitalize on parents' expertise, how to build these relationships with parents, because you're right. I mean, parents are our best partners as teachers in helping students achieve. So as we're kind of like thinking about these ideas, what does this mean for researchers? How do we take your paper and move the field forward?
I'll just say something briefly about that and connect to what Tracey was just saying about these the resources of parents. I think that what we've learned is that when we read research related to the science of teaching reading, if teacher knowledge is mentioned, it's usually talked about as a deficit, in terms of a deficit that teachers have in terms of their knowledge about the science of teaching reading. And so I think that what we're all committed to and in this group is really thinking about teacher knowledge more broadly, and thinking about how teachers draw on the science of reading in addition to other tools, perspectives, and theories about reading development and literacy development. And so we think we really feel strongly that more research is needed that presents teachers, as Allie talked about earlier, having these kind of holistic toolkits in which they respond differently to students in different situations and across different contexts.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like I was talking to Jim Hoffman, I think yesterday, and he was, calling for this more broader science of reading, but teacher preparation. But it feels like it's more than just teacher preparation. It's a science of teacher expertise, a science of how teachers are implementing the science of reading, really acknowledging their expertise and adapting to their students, but I'm also hearing adapting and building relationships with their parents. Fantastic. So as we're kind of like leaving this conversation, I mean, I know I have a lot of nuggets that I'm going to be thinking about and reflecting on as I kind of integrate this with my understanding of the science of reading. What are some big takeaway messages that you guys want us to take away?
I'll jump in here and I'll give one takeaway, and I think Melissa may have some others to share. I'm thinking a lot about this conversation where it started with partnerships and collaborations, and I think one thing that our article does is it shines a light on what teachers and teacher educators are actually doing on the ground in front of kids and in front of teachers. And what they're doing is they're drawing on their knowledge about reading and reading process, and they're drawing on an ethic around anti-racist pedagogy and equitable practices. So they're drawing on multiple narratives in response to teachers, preparing teachers, and children who come to us with different stories, different assets. They're bringing things to the table. So the teachers are on the ground responding while drawing on multiple set knowledges, right, and stances. And I think if you think about the divide of what they're sometimes calling the reading wars, or we're redoing the reading wars, like there's this camp and this camp. I think our article is showing why that doesn't work, why it doesn't work to think inside of isolated narratives about reading instruction, which is really a falsehood, right? And you all talk about this in your issue, this idea that there's like one set of things we can know about reading and it's all in a little box. That's just not how it works. And so I think our piece really showcases that the nuanced side of this, the real life side of it. And I think because I think teachers might be listening to this, that's so important. These teachers are drawing on their own expertise and drawing across these multiple bodies of literature. And I think that's one of the main takeaways that's important from this piece. And I think Melissa has some others.
Well, I also wanted to say, Vickie, Vickie's really been leading the charge in thinking about our state reading standards, science of teaching reading standards in teacher preparation, and thinking about how our program embraces and also builds on and builds past what the state has required us to sort of implement. So Vickie, I'm wondering if you have a takeaway as the person who's been really kind of making those big connections between our program and the state standards.
Yeah, a big takeaway for me is thinking about the importance of the science of reading is just one small piece of what we do with kids. That knowledge of reading development is important, but it's not all of the things, so that when we work with kids, we are following them, we're understanding where they are in the process and how we might support them with what they already know. So yeah.
And there it feels like, Vickie, I mean, I think there's different narratives on the science of reading. And I think different states take different narratives. And so what I'm hearing from you is that the narrative or the like policy implemented science of reading is pretty narrow and is pretty specific and certainly is important. But these other pieces in the conversation, these pieces that our issue is calling for a much broader science of reading, one that includes understanding adaptive teacher expertise, one that includes understanding teacher preparation better, one that includes understanding teacher knowledge better. So I think you're pointing to the fact that the way that the science of reading is being conceptualized is often narrow. And so therefore the way it's implemented in these state reading standards can be narrow. And granted, those standards are important, but just like you said, they're one part of the puzzle. And it seems like your partnerships have allowed you to acknowledge that and to teach that piece of the puzzle, but also to teach the full puzzle. And to really be thinking about even if whether we have the full puzzle figured out and whether there's a few additional pieces that we're working on. Because I also hear a lot of reflection and a lot of critical thinking by your team, because I think doing this work isn't easy. There is no, unfortunately, I don't feel like the puzzles are right out in front of, the pieces are right out in front of us that we can then just put together for students and then they go off and teach. We're always trying to work on, do we have the right pieces of the puzzle out? And so I'm hearing you say the science of reading piece is an important piece, but so is social justice, so is equity, so is building relationships with students, so is building relationships with parents, so is building relationships with schools, so is all of us coming together to do this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really a wonderful experience to have been here at UT, to be able to work with the pre-service teachers inside the schools as partnerships all the way around with the university, partnerships with the schools and the kiddos and the schools and the teachers, and just all of us sort of thinking and working together with all of the pieces in motion. So yes, I agree, it's a complex thing, and you said it very well.
Anything else that we should take away, guys? All right, well, I'm just going to say a big thank you. I really feel like you've done a really great job of acknowledging the strengths that are out there from the science of reading, but also questioning, what are we missing? How does partnerships strengthen the science of reading? How do we ask the right questions? And how do we build these partnerships to really move ourselves forward? So many thanks. Again, I'm coming away with this with lots of nuggets to explore, and I'm just so grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.